Welcome back to a live edition of the Gaming News Canada show. Well, I guess not. Technically, we're recording it live. We will put it out this week. Live here from the Canadian Gaming Summit on the final day. And with me in person, which is unusual, is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the Canadian Gaming Association, Paul Burns. Hey, Paul, I just thought on the Thursday as we wrap up the summit, just be good to get you here at the CGA Members Lounge at the Metro Toronto Convention Center, and just spend a few minutes and do a post-mortem of sorts on the summit. Obviously, this is a crazy week for you, crazy 3 days. Hopefully, it's going to settle down after today, and you can get into summer mode. But what's the week been like for you?
It's always a great week. I've said to a lot of people, it's a bit like a family reunion in one way. It's great to have everybody in town all at once. Our membership, industry professionals and leaders from around the country and across the world, and we've had a fantastic week. Over 3,000 people here. It's really a great conference program with a lot of good content and a real chance for everybody to connect and network. And really for the first time, and this is with Mark in the years of doing the Canadian Gaming Summit, we had 3 ministers that were responsible for gaming come and speak to this group. Minister Nally from Alberta talking about their plans. Minister Cho, who announced a review of Ontario's gaming agencies today, and obviously Minister Downey, who's been a great champion for building a strong regulated market in the gaming space. So that alone is a great recognition of the activity and growth that is happening in Canada's gaming industry. To have the political leaders here who oversee gaming coming to talk to industry directly and being part of this show. So, it's been a great week, and it's always lots going on.
Amanda Brewer mentioned on the podcast last week, and I think this is really important, that Canada gets mentioned, I think, at conferences now. And of course, when I first started covering the industry 4 years ago, when you and I first met, every conference wanted to know about Canada, right? Canada was a hot button topic. The market's settled here now. We're in a bit of a waiting period for Alberta, but this really is the only place to come and get two days of real, true kind of wall-to-wall Canadian content about what's going on in the industry, and speak with the decision makers in the industry here.
Well, it is, and that's what this has always been designed to do, and I think that's it's part of that convening the industry together to do these. These are important occasions, and having this Canadian specific show is exceptionally important to the CGA and for us. And the partners at SBC have been really great in understanding the value, because this show has continued to grow in the last 3 years post-COVID. And I think we're going to see it continue, because there's more activity, there's more changes coming in many ways. But, the innovation is still here. People are bringing new products. The folks from Lotto.com are here about, they sell lottery tickets, but they're a retailer, but a very different model for it. So there's always things to learn and see new experiences, understand the innovation, but also, there's the cybersecurity track this year was fantastic in being able to add another dimension that we sometimes don't spend enough time talking about, some of those other sort of less sexier parts of the gaming, but extremely important. And so, these are the value of these are real, and in fact, it demonstrates in the fact the agencies across from regulators and the operating lottery corporations are here as part of their to build their own network, but also a lot of staff and learning and kinds of team building and doing all of these things that come with having an event like this.
We've covered there. I mentioned on the podcast with Amanda last week that there has been some tension between some of the operators in Ontario, some of the provincial and lottery and gaming corporations. One of the best panels I sat in on was the one on Wednesday, the first day of the summit, with yourself, Dr. Karen Schnarr from the AGCO, and Dallas McCready, the new president and CEO of the Atlantic Lottery Corporation, with Lindsay Slater from Geo Plus Live Moderating. And I think it's really constructive to have people up there with different mandates and different conversations. But for the most part, yourself and Karen and Dallas were on the same page on most of the issues that were discussed in that forum.
Yeah, we are, and it's really, it's this year's, there's these milestone years you look to, right? And I talked to earlier this month, June 3rd was the 40th anniversary of the provinces signing It became the 85 agreement that saw gaming become exclusively the jurisdiction of the provinces and the federal government backing out of the space. And the lottery corporations, OLG celebrating their 50th, ALC celebrating their 50th next year. Some of this is now, as we've matured and growing in the dynamic that's being changed. And one of the things we talked about was the customers are driving this change, right? They're going to places. They've been playing online for 25 years in some cases. With the Canadians have had unrestricted access to online gaming, but the ability to see the positives in building a strong regulated environment, because that sustainability is how we adapt to change, recognize the customer, and understand how public policy and regulation and operating and everything has to continue to evolve with it. And even Minister Cho this morning speaking about how they need to improve, and they're looking at efficiencies and looking at how regulation needs to speak to and be flexible for that evolving technology and time, and not be overly prescriptive. So it gets, and we've seen that with prescriptive legislation, it gets outdated real quick. So it's these kind of, this year in particular, bringing everybody together around this idea of where are we, that mark in time to say, where are we going next? What's the next 40 years going to look like? Because there is change, and it's we're not, the customers are driving that. There's and understanding what that all means, how we can be better operators, better offering, greater consumer protection, more tools for players to manage play, understanding how we can minimize harm to players. And we continue to learn and grow in these events. But the conversation happens, we're all part of the same ecosystem. And while we may disagree on how to get to some places, we all want the same outcomes.
I want to talk a little bit more about Stan Cho, the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Gaming, was the keynote speaker to kick off Thursday. And again, this kind of a reset. I think it makes sense. We're just a little over 3 years into the marketplace now. I think iGaming Ontario has been under a bit of scrutiny in 2025. So, well documented. They still haven't replaced Martha Otten in the leadership chair there. There has been some concerns about AML and also iGaming Ontario's ability to collect that and to really upgrade the technology there. And I think you and I talked last time you were on the podcast. You talked about that. Is this an opportunity for iGaming Ontario and also the province to, like you say, identify those efficiencies and put a plan in place to adapt to the changes, as you mentioned, the changes that have happened 3 years into this market?
Yeah, and one of the things is that in this, because obviously those who have played in the Ontario and Canadian markets understand the role of there's a conductive manager and there's a regulator. And that's a unique part of the Canadian system because of the way the criminal code is structured. So some will say, oh, we got two regulators, or we've got, like, I've heard all phrases. And the reality is that also they both require operators to report information. So what Minister Cho has said with his review, and what we've been talking to government in Ontario, both in the land-based business and in the online business, is the fact that you're asking for information. Sometimes a regulator asks it in this format, and maybe a different time of year, and this one, and then the conductive manager will ask for it this way or require this audit. They both do the same, different, and he wants to find a way to streamline that, and so do we, because that is, in a very competitive marketplace, both in online and in land-based, those dollars spent on compliance are meaningful. And that's where, Dr. Karen Schneider uses a phrase about efficient, effective regulation. Can't agree more. That's exactly what we want. And it's also with the reporting that goes with that. How is it done? How can we make it easier for operators and more cost efficient and not be overly burdensome? Government will want the information they want. But we also say, okay, if you need that information, look at why and what's the purpose. Because if you don't have one, maybe you shouldn't collect it. And that's what Dr. Starr said on the panel. And it's a great time to review that. We have to sometimes take a step back and look at how we do things and what we're doing. Can we do it better? And we are all in to help that happen, because there are ways. Technology is allowing, whether it's use of putting data into vaults or the industry can fill, and the government wants to go and take what they want and look at it. Okay, maybe we can do something to create more cost-effective ways and more effective regulatory environments that actually deliver the outcomes for everybody. And that's what we want. And that's why we need changes to Canada's AML legislation that better reflects our gaming industry, better reflects the digital economy, because a lot of those rules were written for a cash-based, land-based business over a decade ago. And you need to ensure that we have a culture of compliance. We're built on regulation. So for this industry, it's just how can we do it more effectively? Give us regulations that actually understand how we operate and work better. So because then we can meet those requirements. We can exceed those requirements in many cases.
Like obviously, Minister Cho's mandate's not for the gaming industry from coast to coast to coast, but I do wonder if this opens the door a little bit. And harmonization was with one of the panels here at the summit. And I do wonder if this is an opportunity to open the door to a more seamless, and I think you and I have talked about this, Paul, about there being a national strategy at some point where provinces can work together and it is a little bit more seamless and operators can come in and there's not one set of rules for Ontario, another set of rules for Alberta. You're filling out, essentially paperwork for one province, paperwork for another province. Is this kind of a opening door, a crack to maybe getting down that road?
It is, and that's exactly what we are starting to talk about more, about the need for harmonization across the jurisdictions. And it comes in seizing upon the opportunities where the provinces are in all range of trade, commerce, and regulation are looking to reduce or harmonize barriers to doing business. We actually want the gaming industry part of that conversation. And the nice part is that, Minister Nally is the Minister of Red Tape Reduction in Alberta, is also responsible for gaming. And now Minister Cho announcing a review to look at greater efficiencies in the Ontario government's commitment to doing this. We're going to seize upon those opportunities and say, okay, it's time. We, as a gaming industry, the technical requirements from coast to coast are slightly different in places, not significantly, but it's the time is to say, we understand it's easier to do business. It actually can, for certain jurisdictions, adopting or having a universal standard can help more people look at their markets where there may have been a barrier. If you're uniquely one-off and it's not a very big market, am I going to get the suppliers that actually want to give us product that we need? So there's a benefit kind of on both ways of saying you can create greater opportunity for Canadian businesses to do business coast to coast coast, or you find for suppliers that want to come to this market, this is a really great market to do business in and come here. And I talked to two companies who are bringing operations to Canada, Ontario, because of what they can find here in terms of opportunity, talent. Canadian dollar doesn't hurt, but they're looking at it and saying this is a good place to be because this market is growing to what it is, and we can be a home for innovators if we try and align things and those technical standards. While they seem minor in some places, can be big barriers for companies to say I have to re-engineer a product or do something different to take it to that market. Is it worth it? Is the ROI there? Where if it's standardization, then Canada becomes in some ways one market. Doesn't mean the provinces have full ability on a whole host of other areas to craft unique markets for themselves. But when it comes to technical and regulatory standards, there is a need to actually start to harmonize those things because the industry will benefit from it, customers will benefit from it, and the province as well through ability and ease to do business in their jurisdictions.
Paul, just two more questions. You mentioned Dale Nally, and just talking to some people, there was a bit of disappointment with his remarks yesterday. I'm maybe looking at you as the voice of reason here and looking at a big picture. I guess the main takeaway or the main bit of news was that tax rates will be an item of discussion this summer. They're also looking at the advertising, and there'll be more meaningful conversation, I guess, when the legislature returns in the fall. But what did you take? What did you take from the minister's remarks?
Well, it's what's very clear is now there is a plan in Alberta to begin to build the framework and roll it out. That they've taken care of the legislative requirements. They're done. The structure is done. And now looking at the work of building out a regulatory framework, ability for companies to get registered and licensed, what are the conditions, and then ultimately what is the business arrangement. So there is a plan to consult. There is a plan to engage industry. We've continued to dialogue with them, and I guess we see there's benefit in building on that harmonization team. It's taking a look at what has been done and don't discard what's been in Ontario, and actually try and embrace some of it, because there has been they moved the bar significantly in greater consumer protection. The technical standards, while they're not GLI standards in Ontario directly, but they're really close. But okay, maybe we can, if you're going to adopt the GLI standard in Alberta, which they have done in cases, it won't be a big lift for companies. So we can get to these places. So it's the devil in the details in sense of the relationship, but it's they've got a plan to work through a number of steps they have to. The government had said the cabinet wants to make decisions along the way. Minister's been pretty clear about the fact that his government will continue to have input, his colleagues, and he's so it's in a good place. I think we know we're on there's a path now, there's a plan, and they're definitely getting to work. So that's great, because our real concern is it's not time so much, it's get it right. Let's work to get it right, because then you don't have to fix it again. It doesn't, like, getting it right and making sure that all the it's balanced. It meets the government objectives. It's an operating environment which gaming companies and suppliers want to embrace. Then we're good.
And just quickly, before the summit started, I believe you made a quick trip out west to Calgary for the G7 Canada Brain Economy Summit, and part of the agenda was dedicated to responsible gambling and gaming policy. What can you tell the audience about the CGA's role in that? And is this something? My understanding, talking to a couple of people who attended, was this was the first in a 3 or 4 step process, and where will that lead to?
Yeah, it was the Brain Capital Alliance is a project that has been connected to through the G7 for a few years. It was looking at the brain capital economy. It was actually a phrase Dr. Harris Ayre, who is executive director of the Brain Capital Alliance, spoke about how the term brain health with brain skills with brain capital was actually the late Michael Wilson, Canada's former finance minister, who he dedicated a lot of his advocacy work post-politics to mental health and the healthy brain. And it was he, and then it's in that spirit they built the Brain Capital Alliance, because it is about the importance of mental health and building a strong economy. And that's how it's connected to that return on investment for investing in strong mental health and brain capital. And so within that, the alliance has invited industry in to join them. And Kevin Winters, who operates a company called Digital Health in the responsible gaming space, was by Dr. Ayre, was sort of tasked with bringing the gaming industry in, and it was framed in a really constructive way. And in fact, that Dr. Ayre's letter to the participants talked about that gaming is part of the economy and society. It's an entertainment product. It's not inherently harmful, but we understand that people have issues with it, and now with the growth of a digital economy, the role of that product in that bigger digital space. So in framing that, it was also a chance for the gaming industry. And we met the day before the actual capital. About 80 people from across the globe, and different operators, regulators, legislators, treatment professionals, public health professionals, sat in a room to talk about finding that it's really the beginnings of a strategy to create a global framework for dealing with responsible gaming and gaming policy. And it was productive because this isn't a jurisdictional issue. It is a global issue everybody deals with, but making sure that we're dealing with it in a productive and positive framework. Because in the way Dr. Ayre framed it, around that it is part of society, and it's how an understanding. And we talked about from public education to treatment delivery. It was a wide scoping of discussion on finding strategies. And so there's a steering committee of which I'm happy to be a part of. It was great to be there on behalf of as Canada being the host of the G7 this year, and Minister Nally came on behalf of the government of Alberta and shared his commitment to building a healthy gaming environment in Alberta. And we talked about the next steps of bringing together a group of people to begin to frame what are the research priorities we need to do, what focus on. And I'll take one of the takeaways when I was wrapping up the day. There was a gentleman from California who's in the mental health space and has had limited dealings with the gaming industry, but came to speak about mental health delivery. And he actually raised a really great point, because he said, I hear these terms of problem gambling and responsible gaming and player health, and he goes, well, what is it? You guys got to need one term. I need a better understanding of what is it you're trying to talk about here. And it was kind of funny, but a lot of people in the room kind of nodded and went, right, it's finding that terminology. And what does that mean? And being able to describe what we want to do. And I think it was kind of it was a moment to say, of an outsider saying, this is what I see. And I think we have to have an open mind. We have to have the dialogue, and then everybody's got a role to play at the table. And it's not about, it's how people interact and learn from our products. So there's a part of financial literacy for kids that gaming is an entertainment product. You budget like you budget for anything else in your life, and the fact that what is what it isn't, and not be part of a discussion that if you restrict, ban, contain, limit, and all of those things may not produce the right outcomes of people understanding that everybody talks about normalization. Well, yes, it is, and let's talk about it, and let's make sure, because that means that we'll get to a discussion and people understand how to use it. Some of the discussion stigmatizes our business unfairly. Gaming has been around for a long time, and a lot of centuries, and so it has been part of society, and we understand how to do that. And in the digital environment, we've had to learn more, and we're doing that. And that's where this working group is really going to start to look at finding those topics. It's a great initiative. Conversation doesn't hurt, but it's built on a framework of all of the facets, from research to policymakers to operators, treatment provider. Everybody's have a voice together, and let's work on this together.
Is there a date for that committee to get together?
It's going to start to meet virtually on a regular basis, and then the Brain Capital Alliance is actually meets regularly in conjunction with other global events. So the next one is around when the UN General Assembly starts in New York in September, and then they're part of the G20 in Davos. And because one of the co-chairs is a gentleman from the Davos, the Swiss research that does a lot of work in Alzheimer's. Because it was great to sit on the Saturday. The next day was a room full of neuroscientists, not people who definitely have been involved in the gaming sector, but all talking about how various parts of the research and the work they do in the various parts of the economy and the world, from memory care to positive mental health for kids, to researching the impact of mental health on economy, of what time loss, work loss means to the economy, and not having strong mental health supports for employees, to our aging population. It was a very diverse, interesting, learned a lot, but also understood that they come at it with a very focus on how it impacts the economy and how it affects human success. And so some would say it's got lofty goals and all of those kinds of things, but it's very interesting, the fact that people are looking at that from the built form to civil society. How do we make the world healthy, mental health better, and positive outcomes for the economy by doing that? So it was very interesting. I have to say, I learned a lot, and but I know it was a chance to bring the gaming industry together to try something a little different, and we'll see how it works. Some people have opinions. I encourage everybody to have an open mind, and let's work together.
That is Paul Burns, the president and CEO of the Canadian Gaming Association. Paul, thank you for making the time at the end of a very busy week.
Yeah, I still got 2 meetings to do.
Yeah, and we'll also, while we're at it, we'll just plug the fact that Gaming News Canada does have a partnership with the CGA. Paul actually was in the podcast host chair a week or so ago for the inaugural Get to Know Canadian Gaming podcast, which you can find on the Gaming News Canada YouTube channel. So I would encourage you to watch that conversation between Paul and got more action, Trevor LeBlanc from Ipsos. Thanks for Paul for joining us again. We'll wrap up. That's it for this episode of the Gaming News Canada show. As always, you can find us on all the various podcast apps, along with our Substack page at gamingnewscanada.ca. And as I mentioned, you can also watch this podcast on our YouTube channel. Thanks so much to Paul Burns again, and we'll sign off from the Canadian Gaming Summit and see everybody again very soon.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Paul.